With our eyes fixed upon the whole system, no one will be surprised that we should define modernism to be the synthesis of all heresies. This condemnation of modernism as the ultimate culmination of heresies came from Pascendi Dominici Gregis, an encyclical by Pope St. Pius X. So, what is modernism, and what was the Church's response? Find out in this episode of Catholic History Trek.
God bless America.
God love you. I want these to be my first words of greeting to you. They will be the concluding words on each broadcast.
I am not the Catholic candidate for president. I am the Democratic Party's candidate for president.
Annuncio optis gaudium magnum. Habemus Papam.
You've embarked on a Catholic history trek.
Most heresies are easy to pin down. They're either based on the erroneous teachings of an individual, Arius and Arianism, Montanus and Montanism, Luther and Lutheranism, or on a particular error, Docetism, Modalism, Adoptionism. But modernism was not sparked by one person or one event. Instead, its infestation was the work of centuries. Its seeds were arguably sowed with humanism and spread with humanism's religious branch, Protestantism, and became the foundation of 18th century philosophy. It was enforced by the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, and became the foundation of emergent democratic societies, and by the 19th century had infiltrated much of the Western world. One of the Church's early responses to the spread of modernism was Mirari Vos, issued by Pope Gregory XVI in 1832. In this encyclical, the Supreme Pontiff decried the evils which afflicted the Church in the early 19th century. Among these was what he called a perverse opinion and fraud of the wicked, that it is possible to obtain salvation by proclaiming any religion so long as one acts morally. He further added, without a doubt, they will perish forever, unless they hold the Catholic faith whole and inviolate. Gregory XVI denounced this evil and others under the title of liberalism. Half a century later, this heretical movement would be dubbed modernism. It's a name often credited to Charles Perrin, a 19th century Belgian Catholic professor at the Louvain. Perrin defined it as the ambition to eliminate God from social life, and dated its definitive form to the French Revolution. Along these lines, in the early 20th century, Abbé Gaudin would describe modernism as the abuse of what is modern. In its religious context, modernism places one's private conscience as the highest authority, to which one may seek his own truth and embark on any religious venture. Modernism rejects revealed truths and places little value on timeless dogmas, and rejects both miracles and prophecies. It also seeks to emancipate a universal conscience with which the Church must conform to, and it seeks to reconcile all men across denominational and religious lines by placing unity above doctrine. The heresy of modernism promoted both ecumenism and salvation outside of the Catholic Church, both of which seem to have been embraced by many Catholics today. The deism of America's founding fathers can correctly be aligned with modernism. To advance modernism, secret societies such as the Illuminati and Carbonari formed, with the goal of overthrowing the existing European monarchies, which had deep roots in Christianity. These overthrown governments would be replaced with liberal democracies and republics, or, at the very least, with constitutional monarchies, all where the state would be divorced from a strong religious authority or supervision. Already in the early 19th century, the Church saw the dangers posed by these societies and issued various condemnations against joining them, which is why, for the past 2 centuries, Catholics have been prohibited from becoming Freemasons. This modernist plan manifested in the mid-19th century with the so-called Age of Revolutions. That would be when France, Italy, Germany, Denmark, Austria, and other countries all saw their ruling classes either overthrown or compelled to offer large concessions of power. The Church was not immune from the spirit of change. For modernism to progress, ecclesiastical authority would need to be weakened, so the church could be remodeled to fit to the spirit of the modern age. And so when Pope Gregory XVI died in 1846, the ensuing papal conclave became a battleground between tradition and modernism. After a short conclave, the liberal candidate, Giovanni Maria, was elected to usher in the modernist reforms into the Papal States, and then into the Catholic Church. Taking the name Pope Pius IX, he began to install a liberal policy, but found rather quickly that what seemed like a good idea on paper was anything but in reality. When he paused the rapid implementation of change, the liberal elites organized what today we would call woke mobs. They organized street riots, shot a prelate, stabbed the prime minister, and forced Pius IX to escape Rome. After a 1.5-year-long exile, this champion of liberalism returned to Rome as a defender of traditional Catholicism. During that time, and immediately afterward, he desired to compile a list of modern errors to be condemned. This compilation, or syllabus, of modernist errors was slow-moving and went through various commissions, until finally, in 1864, Pius IX condemned the current errors of his time in the encyclical Quanta Cura. In it, he echoed Pope Gregory XVI's denouncement of liberty as an absolute right, and he decried the liberty to openly manifest any and every error as a liberty of perdition, and to allow this was an insanity. Accompanying this encyclical Quanta Cura was a syllabus officially titled A Syllabus Containing the Most Important Errors of Our Time, which had been condemned by our Holy Father, Pius IX, in allocutions at consistories, in encyclicals, and other apostolic letters. That title is commonly shortened to the Syllabus of Errors. It listed the 80 most important errors of the mid-19th century, which the Pope had condemned in various encyclicals and other writings. The following are among the 80 condemned errors. Humanity is the sole arbiter of truth. The prophecies and miracles of the Bible can be dismissed as myths and fictional narratives. The Church must take a backseat to science. Man is free to embrace any religion and can find his way to salvation through that religion. Protestantism is simply another valid expression of Christianity. The civil government is the ultimate authority in education. The Church ought to be separated from the state, and the state from the Church. Moral and civil laws need not be connected to divine law. Marriage is merely a legal contract, and therefore divorce is permissible. It would be good to abolish the Papal States. The release of Quanta Cura and this preceding Syllabus of Errors were Pope Pius IX's defiant stand against liberalism, which was working hard to erode the Catholic Church's influence in national politics, education, family life, and individual salvation. As such, these documents were met with disapproval by the liberal leaders of the day, who loudly denounced them, and their publication was even forbidden in several countries. While the syllabus had categorically documented the modernist errors, it had not halted their spread. And not only had they continued to spread abroad, but even inside the walls of the Catholic Church. It was something witnessed firsthand by Joseph Sarto, who, 39 years after the release of Quanta Cura, was elected as Pope St. Pius X. Today, this modernist infiltration into the Church is what we might call the historical critical method, prevalent in many seminaries today. To confront the ever-growing threat and infiltration of modernism, in 1907, Pius X issued Lamentabili Sane Exitu, which condemned the chief principles of modernism in 65 points. Essentially, an updated syllabus echoing the sentiments of Pope Pius IX's Syllabus of Errors. On the heels of issuing Lamentabili, Pius X issued the encyclical Pascendi Dominici Gregis on the doctrine of the modernists. It's in this document where you'll find Pius X's famous line about modernism as the synthesis of all heresies. While Lamentabili outlined the errors, Pascendi went into more detail, including ways to combat the modernist heresy. Among these was the establishment of a council of vigilance in every diocese, with censors who were tasked with watching for every trace and sign of modernism, both in publications and in teaching. to further strengthen the Church's position against the heresy of modernism. In 1910, Pius X released the motu proprio Sacrorum Antistitum, which contained an oath against modernism. This oath listed articles to be accepted, articles to be rejected, and a commitment to embrace all the doctrines taught by the Catholic Church. It was to be sworn by all clergy, pastors, confessors, preachers, religious superiors, and seminary professors, basically as a safeguard that those who taught and presented the Catholic faith were, in fact, Catholic. 60 years after the introduction of the Oath Against Modernism, Pope Paul VI abolished it. Also at this time, the Councils of Vigilance were disbanded. Almost immediately after the Oath of Modernism was rescinded, a gathering of modernist Catholic university administrators, including Theodore McCarrick and Theodore Hesburgh of Notre Dame, issued the Land O'Lakes Statement, which defined what they saw as the modern role of a Catholic university. Included in the statement were: the primary task of the theological department at a Catholic university is not to teach Catholicism, but to explore all religions. Catholic doctrines should not be placed ahead of other religious or philosophical views, and students should experiment with and change the rite of the Mass. So, where does this leave us today, more than a century and a half after the Church declared open war against the heresy of modernism? I thought I would end the episode by considering some of the errors condemned in Pope Pius IX's Syllabus of Errors and add my personal reflections on a few of them. Error number 7. Much of what is in the Bible, the prophecies, miracles, and even Jesus himself, are myth. This reminds me of Father Arturo Sosa, the Superior General of the Jesuits, who denied the existence of the devil only a few years ago. And of course, many Catholics today reject the historical accounts of Genesis, especially creation. And even Pope Pius XII called for openness to the human body being evolved from living matter. And John Paul apparently claimed evolution of man was more than a hypothesis. But check out episode 89 for more on the Church's history with evolution. Error 12. The Church impedes scientific progress. You can check out our Galileo episode for more on that. Error 15. Man may embrace and profess whatever religion he so chooses. Regarding this error, many are quick to point to Dignitatis Humanae, Vatican II's Declaration on Religious Liberty, which some say teaches this very error, that because man is endowed with reason, he is compelled to follow his conscience and follow it to embrace whatever religion he chooses. Errors 16 and 17. Man can find salvation through any religion. I'll admit the first thing that came to mind was an interview of Bishop Barron on the Ben Shapiro Show. The bishop claimed the Second Vatican Council said very clearly Christ is the privileged route to salvation. Privileged, of course, means something different than only. Kind of like how the carpool lane is the privileged lane on the highway, but just one of many lanes which leads to your destination. And this error that man can find salvation through any religion was seemingly encouraged during the papacy of John Paul II when he kissed the Quran, regularly prayed with pagans, and even allowed a pagan Buddha idol to be placed atop a tabernacle in a church in Assisi. And of course, more recently, there were the pagan Pachamama idols brought to the Vatican for veneration. Error 18. Protestantism is just another form of the same true Christian religion on par with Catholicism. I suppose one could argue this error was embraced when Pope Paul VI took off his episcopal ring and placed it on the finger of the Anglican Archbishop Michael Ramsey, and more recently, when the popes have permitted Anglican archbishops to celebrate their Protestant liturgies in Catholic churches in Rome. Error 22. Catholic teachers and authors are only bound to conform to church teachings explicitly contained in ex cathedra dogmas. I suppose if Catholic schools were not committing this error today, there wouldn't be certain cases of schools losing the right to use the term Catholic in their names, and there probably wouldn't be the necessity for the Newman Guide, which annually lists the handful of Catholic colleges and universities which focus on forming Catholic students. Schools like Belmont Abbey, Christendom, and Kevin's alma mater in Steubenville. Error 23. The Church has erred in matters of faith and morals. I think one could probably argue every Catholic who embraces contraception, abortion, or the sins promoted by Father James Martin, has fallen into this error. Error 26. The Church has no right to property. I guess any embrace of liberation theology or communism could be called a rejection of private property, which is a key element of Marxism. To that end, a few years back, a Jesuit-run magazine made a Catholic case for communism in one of their articles, and a current cardinal of the Church credited Karl Marx for Catholic social teaching. Error 37. National churches can withdraw from the authority of the Pope. When the Dutch bishops established communion in the hand against the Pope's objections, and when they refused to correct their heretical catechism, they arguably withdrew from the Pope's authority, and if not officially, at least in practice. And you can check out episodes 105 and 153 for more on those topics. Error 44. The civil authority has the right to make enactments regarding the Mass and the administration of other sacraments. I'm not sure if this fully aligns with this error, but what popped in my mind was a few years ago during the COVIDian lockdowns when most, if not all, of the world's bishops followed the civil authorities in regulating and limiting the sacraments by denying the Holy Eucharist and the last rites to Catholics. Error 48 is rather interesting. It basically rejects the idea of allowing Catholic children to partake in education which is separate from the Catholic faith. Error 50. Secular authorities may propose, institute, and depose bishops. While the specifics of the 2018 Vatican-China agreement are secret, this seems to be what the Communist Party is doing in China. Error 57. Morals are not to be influenced by the Church. It's okay to pursue the gratification of pleasure. In some ways, this one reminds me of the continual relaxation of fasting requirements. Gone are the Ember Days and Rogation Days, and the Friday abstinence of meat, which is still in the books, is often blatantly ignored. And yes, we have episodes on each of those topics. Error 70. The canons of the Council of Trent are not dogmatic. And while I haven't read every canon of the Council of Trent, I have read that of Session 22, which was the session on the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass. According to the canons, if one attempts to change the canon of the Mass or celebrate it only in the vernacular, let him be anathema. In other words, anyone who tries to get rid of the Latin Mass would be condemned. One could argue Archbishop Arthur Roche and the author of Traditionis Custodes both fell into this error. Error 73. Marriages can be dissolved and are merely a civil contract. Since the document Amoris Laetitia opens the way for divorced and remarried to receive Holy Communion, it seems to imply the author of that document holds that marriages can be dissolved, which of course would go against that error. So, in conclusion, will the whole world groan and marvel to find itself modernist? I suppose it depends on who you ask. From my personal experience, I found it very fascinating to read these documents by Pope Pius IX and Pius X, because just about everything they condemned as heretical is at odds with just about everything I was taught and discovered in my lived experience of Catholicism for pretty much most of my life. And I cannot say what the future holds for the Church in its war with modernism, what will be condemned, what won't, but I can say taking the time to rate and subscribe to the Catholic History Trek podcast has never been condemned as an error. And if you wish to leave a review, I think you can do that wherever you find the podcast. And if you care to leave a donation, I think you can do that on PayPal. Thank you for listening to us, and thank you for your support. Gloria Patri et Filio Spiritui Sancto, sic ut erat in principio nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
Thank you for listening to Catholic History Trek. You can reach us at catholichistorytrek@gmail.com.